43% of American retirees report they would rather die than exhaust their money before the end of their lives. Not as a figure of speech. Literally, that is a direct quotation from a 2026 survey. And the median person entering retirement right now, not the bottom 10%, the actual median, has $185,000 accumulated according to the most recent Federal Reserve survey of consumer finances. The amount they believe they need to retire with genuine comfort is $1.46 million according to Northwestern Mutual's 2026 Planning and Progress Study. That is not simply a gap. That is a structural breakdown concealed beneath a surface layer of apparent normalcy. But here is what separates this discussion from every retirement doom narrative you have encountered elsewhere. The people being described today are not financially destitute. Some of them are saving consistently and diligently. Some of them are technically on track, according to the projection calculator sitting on their brokerage firm's website. They carry a target number in their head, they are hitting it, and they are still going to deplete their funds before they die. Not because they saved too little, but because of four specific errors that have almost nothing to do with the amount flowing in, and everything to do with how the money comes out, at what point it comes out, and what obstacles it must navigate on the way out. Significant time has been spent reading the research available on this subject, including the EBRI survey, the HealthView actuarial data, the Morningstar withdrawal rate analysis, and the Alliance annual retirement study. Multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars are personally invested. Having operated an independent business while surrounded by accountants and tax attorneys for more than a decade, the consistent pattern that emerges is this: retirement plans that appear completely sound on paper, constructed on assumptions that quietly guarantee failure when put into actual practice. Here are the four warning signs that your plan carries that exact problem. Think of retirement savings the way you would think about a vehicle fuel tank. Everyone becomes fixated on the size of the tank. Fill it to maximum capacity. Make it as large as humanly possible. That fixation is understandable, and filling the tank genuinely matters. But the moment you pull away from the driveway on the first day of retirement, the tank alone does not automatically protect you. The rate at which you burn fuel during the first few miles, the unexpected tolls on roads the navigation system never revealed, the detour that adds 200 miles to the journey, those are the variables that ultimately determine whether you arrive at your destination. Throughout this discussion, four distinct versions of that scenario will be examined using actual numbers and documented evidence. In a few minutes, something about market timing will be revealed that may cause you to question every retirement projection you have ever reviewed. But first, here is why the backup strategy most people have constructed for themselves, specifically the plan to simply work a few additional years if necessary, has probably already broken down before it was ever needed. A scenario that appears repeatedly in the data involves a man in his mid-50s, a project manager at a mid-sized manufacturing company with 15 years at the same organization. He earns approximately $90,000 annually, holds $240,000 in his 401k, and he understands that figure is behind where it should be. His plan is to remain employed until age 67, contribute the maximum allowable amount every year, allow compounding to perform its function, and arrive at $750,000 or possibly more. He has performed the calculations himself. He feels behind schedule but recoverable. That plan rests on a foundational premise that holds true for a shrinking portion of the population, and the data is now precise about just how small that portion has become. According to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, whose 2026 Retirement Confidence Survey was recently published, 46% of Americans exit the workforce earlier than they originally intended. The Society of Actuaries places that figure at 59%. Transamerica, in a separate study examining over 3,600 retirees, found that 58% retired ahead of their planned schedule. The median actual retirement age in America is 62. The median expected retirement age among current workers is 65. That 3-year discrepancy is not a statistical rounding error. It is a structural reality that has persisted across more than 2 decades of consistent survey data without any sign of narrowing. The causes, according to 2026 EBRI findings, are telling. 76% of early retirements result from circumstances entirely beyond the individual's personal control. 41% cited a health problem or physical disability, an increase from 31% just 1 year earlier. 35% cited corporate restructuring, workforce reductions, business closures, or organizational changes. The project manager in this scenario gets absorbed by a larger competitor. His position is eliminated during the ownership transition. He is 57 years old. He is out of a job. His 6-month severance package appears generous until he spends 14 months searching for a comparable position and ends up at 60 accepting a role, paying $70,000 with no employer matching contribution. He did not make poor decisions. The employment market for his particular skill set shifted around him without warning. This happens with remarkable consistency. Here is precisely why this first warning sign is especially dangerous. The contributions he loses are not arbitrary contributions selected at random. They are the contributions positioned closest to the retirement finish line. The years spanning from 55 to 65 represent peak earning capacity and peak saving potential. They are the years when contributions have the least exposure to being erased by a market decline and the greatest runway for compounding. Before withdrawals begin, lose those specific years and you are not merely short on total contributions. You are short on the most efficiently positioned contributions you were ever going to make throughout your entire career. The average retirement duration has expanded from roughly 13 years for men in 1970 to nearly 19 years today. A forced departure at 57 rather than 65 means funding 27 years of retirement instead of 19, with a smaller portfolio than originally projected, beginning earlier than anticipated. That represents an entirely different financial problem, wearing the clothing of the original plan. Here is the number that should genuinely concern anyone who has constructed a work longer to catch up strategy. According to the 2026 EBRI survey, 75% of current workers report that they intend to work for pay during retirement to supplement their primary income. Only 29% of actual retirees report successfully doing so. Physical health deteriorates. The employment market does not welcome 63-year-old applicants the same way it welcomes 40-year-olds. The plan dissolves quietly before anyone recognizes what has happened. If your retirement strategy requires reaching a specific age of employment, and particularly if it requires part-time earned income after retirement, as a baseline assumption built into the numbers, you need to stress test that assumption the same way a structural engineer tests a bridge. Not whether it will hold under standard operating conditions, but what happens when two separate components fail simultaneously. Because the data consistently shows that two simultaneous failures is not an outlier scenario, it is the established pattern. This is the first warning sign. Stay engaged because the following section deserves particularly close attention. A financial researcher named Wade Pfau has produced some of the most consequential work in retirement mathematics. One of his documented findings is this: approximately 77% of a portfolio's ultimate retirement outcome can be explained by the returns experienced during only the first 10 years of retirement, not the final 10 years, not the middle decade. The first 10, during which you are withdrawing from the portfolio rather than contributing to it. This phenomenon is called sequence of returns risk, and the mechanism deserves clear explanation because once it becomes visible, it cannot be unseen. Two individuals retire on the same calendar date, same age, same portfolio value of $1 million each. Same asset allocation, identical average annual returns across 30 years at 7% annually. On paper, both of their retirement calculators display identical projections. One of them depletes their money before they die. The other leaves a meaningful inheritance to their family. The only distinguishing factor between them is the chronological order in which favorable and unfavorable market years arrived. Consider the concrete mathematics involved. Person A retires in January of the year 2000. The technology bubble collapses over the following 2 years. She begins withdrawing $40,000 annually to cover living expenses. In year 1, her investment position declines 25%. Her $1 million portfolio becomes $750,000. She withdraws $40,000. She holds $710,000. In year 2, another 20% decline occurs. Her portfolio falls to $568,000. She withdraws another $40,000. She sits at $528,000. She entered retirement with $1 million. Within 24 months, she holds roughly half that amount. Not because she made poor investment decisions, because the market happened to perform badly during the specific years when she had no employment paycheck available to bridge the shortfall. Person B retires in 2010 as the market is recovering from its prior lows. His early retirement years experience strongly positive returns. He withdraws $40,000 annually from a growing base that never sustains damage during its most critical exposure window. He reaches 80 years of age with money remaining in the account. Both experienced an identical 7% average annual return across the full 30-year measurement period. Two fundamentally different retirement outcomes. Because when systematic withdrawals are being made from a portfolio, the mathematics are not governed by averages. They are governed by sequence. The brutal underlying mechanism works as follows. When markets decline in the early years of retirement, you are compelled to liquidate more shares to generate the same withdrawal amount at precisely the worst possible moment. Those liquidated shares are permanently gone from the portfolio. They cannot participate in the subsequent recovery because they were sold to purchase groceries during the period of decline. The portfolio that remains is permanently smaller, and even a substantial subsequent market rally cannot restore you to the position you would have occupied because the recovery is compounding on an already damaged foundation. Schwab's Center for Financial Research modeled this dynamic directly. Two investors, both beginning with $1 million, both taking $50,000 in initial annual withdrawals, both experiencing 15% portfolio declines in years 1 and 2. Beginning in year 3, both portfolios grow at 6% annually. The investor who could not meaningfully reduce spending exhausts their money significantly earlier than the investor who successfully reduced withdrawals during the difficult early years. But the majority of retired individuals cannot substantially reduce spending during a market downturn. Healthcare premiums, housing costs, utility expenses, those obligations do not flex downward on demand. Research examining this dynamic summarizes the conclusion precisely. The first 5 years of retirement carry more influence over portfolio survival than the following 25 years combined. This is the second warning sign, and it connects to the first in a way that carries material consequences. The forced early retirement increases the probability of retiring directly into an unfavorable market window, because the individual never had the opportunity to choose their departure timing deliberately. Someone who planned to leave during a bull market can monitor conditions for 6 months and select a favorable entry point to some degree. Someone who receives a layoff notice at 57 during a volatile market year has no such option available. The 4% rule, the widely cited principle stating that withdrawing 4% of your portfolio annually during retirement will prevent exhaustion of funds across a 30-year period, was developed using historical United States market data extending back to the 1920s. Morningstar's 2026 State of Retirement Income Research positions the current safe starting withdrawal rate closer to 3.9% for a balanced portfolio. For a $1 million portfolio, that represents a $10,000 annual difference in sustainable income compared to the standard guidance. For anyone who planned around 4.4% or 4.5%, which numerous online calculators present as a default assumption, the gap is even more substantial. The retirement projection calculator on your brokerage firm's website assumes average returns distributed uniformly across each year of retirement. It does not model the scenario where your first 3 years resemble the period from 2000 through 2002. It presents the median outcome. The median outcome is acceptable. The bad sequence outcome is a retirement that functions adequately for 12 years and then stops functioning at age 73. The originator of the 4% rule reviewed his own data in 2024 and acknowledged that the rule may require updating for prevailing market conditions. That is the financial equivalent of someone selling you a waterproof jacket and informing you 4 years later that it may not perform adequately in heavy rainfall. Accurate information delivered at the wrong time. Here is the element that rarely appears inside a standard retirement calculator. Understanding these numbers and constructing a functional system around them are two entirely separate disciplines. Analysis without architectural structure does not actually provide protection. When searching for a resource that translated 50 years of accumulated retirement research into a practically usable framework, not personal opinion, not anecdote, but genuine actuarial and market data spanning multiple decades, nothing comprehensive and consolidated could be found in one place. So the work of building it began independently. The result is a digital resource constructed on 50 years of retirement data, distilled into a mathematical framework for determining with precision when stopping work becomes financially viable. Not someday. Not when it feels emotionally correct. A specific date supported by specific verified numbers. Two components connect directly to everything discussed here. The first addresses exactly why the standard withdrawal guideline fails under sequence of returns conditions, and what a dynamic withdrawal method looks like when applied in practice. A fixed withdrawal rate is a passive strategy built on the assumption of average returns arriving in average order. A dynamic strategy adjusts in response to actual market conditions, which is the only approach that corresponds to how the real world operates. The second component addresses the statistical reality that more than half of all retirements are forced to begin earlier than planned. It maps the specific buffer required and identifies what form that buffer should take to survive an unplanned gap between your final paycheck and your full retirement income stream, without permanently damaging your portfolio sequencing profile in the process. The urgency behind stress testing your plan against these 4 warning signs is not manufactured for dramatic effect. Every year that passes without that stress test is a year the clock continues running in the wrong direction. Returning now to the 4 warning signs. You might reasonably assume that Social Security claiming timing represents the most widely understood problem in retirement planning. And you would be correct that awareness of it is broad. Approximately 90% of people make a suboptimal claiming decision regardless. Here is the documented reason why. As of December 2025, the average monthly Social Security payment for a 62-year-old new claimant was $1,335. For a new recipient age 67, the monthly amount was approximately $2,521, paid every single month for the remainder of their life. The difference in 2026 between the maximum benefit available for someone claiming at 62 versus waiting until age 70 is $2,112 per month. $5,481 at age 70 compared to $2,969 at age 62, according to published benefit schedules. That is not a marginal optimization. That is $26,544 in additional annual income, guaranteed and inflation indexed by the federal government, available for the remainder of your natural life. Project that across a 20-year retirement. Claiming at 70 rather than 62 increases your monthly benefit by approximately 76%. Across 20 years, the cumulative lifetime income difference extends well into 6-figure territory. Not from superior investment selection. Not from additional years of employment. From choosing a different date on a government enrollment form. While financial experts broadly recommend waiting until age 70 to claim Social Security retirement benefits, research published in 2022 by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that only approximately 10% of eligible individuals actually follow that guidance. The proportion claiming at 62 has declined from more than 60% in the 1990s to approximately 26% in 2024, the lowest rate recorded in at least 4 decades. Still, 1 in 4 people permanently accepts a 30% monthly reduction. Here is the psychology that drives that decision, and this is where the critical reversal in thinking occurs. You may believe the primary concern is Social Security program solvency. The actual problem is the claiming decision you make today based on that concern. A 2025 AARP poll found that more individuals are claiming benefits early, predominantly because of anxiety about Social Security's long-term financial stability, amid widely circulated reports that its trust funds face potential depletion. The underlying logic is to accept something now rather than wait for a larger amount and risk receiving nothing eventually. This is fear-driven mathematics, but if Congress takes no corrective action whatsoever, benefits would face a reduction to approximately 83% of their scheduled amounts at the point of trust fund depletion. Not elimination, not zero. 83%, a 17% reduction at worst compared to the permanent 30% reduction you voluntarily lock in by claiming at 62 right now, today, with absolute certainty. You are hedging against the smaller theoretical future risk by deliberately accepting the larger guaranteed current one. Here is the connection between Social Security timing and the second warning sign that most people never recognize. The higher your guaranteed monthly Social Security income floor, the smaller the amount you must withdraw from your investment portfolio each month to cover living expenses. The smaller the amount pulled from the portfolio monthly, the fewer shares you are forced to liquidate at depressed prices when an unfavorable market year strikes during your critical first 5 years of retirement. Delaying Social Security directly reduces your sequence of returns exposure, not through any sophisticated investment strategy, but through the straightforward mechanical relationship between guaranteed income and required portfolio withdrawal rates. A 2019 study conducted by United Income determined that 92% of retirees would be financially better served by waiting at least until age 65 to claim Social Security benefits. Any claiming age below that threshold produced a suboptimal outcome, with age 62 representing the worst available option. Approximately 57% of retirees would accumulate more total lifetime income by waiting until age 70, according to the same research. Consider an individual who appears consistently in the underlying data without carrying a specific name. Call him David. David is 63 years old. He retired at 61 when his employer announced a reduction in force and offered him an early separation incentive package. He held $420,000 in his 401k at that point, more than the majority of Americans his age if measured honestly against available data. He claimed Social Security at 62 because he required income while he evaluated his next steps. He received $1,400 monthly. He had no specific financial plan for covering healthcare costs during the period before Medicare eligibility. He enrolled in coverage through the ACA marketplace. David is actively exhibiting 3 of the 4 warning signs described in this discussion. He was unaware of this. He believed he was making rational, sensible decisions under the pressure of difficult circumstances. He was. They were the default decisions available to him, and the default path contains a structural vulnerability that compounds over time. The 4th warning sign is what will amplify everything else David is already managing. If you retire at 62, which again represents the current median actual retirement age in America, you do not have Medicare coverage. Medicare eligibility begins at 65. You face a minimum 3-year window during which you are entirely responsible for your own health insurance costs. And that window just became dramatically more expensive to navigate. The Enhanced Affordable Care Act, subsidies that expired at the conclusion of 2025, mean that 24 million Americans will experience a sharp escalation in healthcare costs unless Congress acts to extend the premium tax credits that were previously available. The population segment facing the greatest exposure is middle-income Americans between the ages of 50 and 64. This is precisely the group most statistically likely to experience a forced early retirement, who remain years away from Medicare eligibility and who now face the prospect of doubled or tripled health insurance costs. In states and geographic rating areas where base premiums are elevated, a 62-year-old exceeding the income threshold for subsidy eligibility can face $1,200 to $1,800 or more monthly for a benchmark silver plan. Allow that figure to register fully. Between $1,200 and $1,800 every single month before a single dollar has been directed toward food, housing, transportation, or any other living expense. One couple, a husband and wife previously covered under a union health plan, watched their combined insurance premium drop from $2,700 monthly to $700 upon transitioning to Medicare. A $2,000 monthly reduction occurring automatically simply by reaching the age of 65, which means the 3 years immediately preceding that birthday were costing them $2,000 per month, more than would eventually be necessary. That represents $72,000 evaporated from a retirement portfolio for one reason only: calendar age. Now extend the view to the complete life cycle cost of healthcare throughout retirement. For an average healthy couple age 65, total annual healthcare costs under traditional Medicare options will rise from $17,032 in the first year of retirement to $55,513 annually by age 85. Projected lifetime healthcare premiums under traditional Medicare options for a healthy couple retiring in 2026 reach $688,996. When deductibles, co-payments, and expenses related to hearing, vision, and dental care are incorporated, total lifetime healthcare costs climb to $955,411, approaching $1 million for a couple who enters retirement in good health. Healthcare cost inflation is projected at 5.8% annually over the long term, while Social Security cost of living adjustments are projected to increase at only 2.4% per year. Healthcare expenses are expanding at more than double the growth rate of your primary inflation protection mechanism every single year for the remainder of your retirement. Your fuel tank has a slow leak that is progressively widening. According to the 2025 Milliman Retiree Health Cost Index, retiring at 60 rather than 65 can increase lifetime healthcare expenditures by roughly 56% under a Medigap pathway and approximately 90% under a Medicare Advantage pathway. So every year before age 65 is not simply a year of foregoing Medicare coverage, it is a year of exponentially higher uncovered costs landing on a portfolio that is already smaller than originally projected due to the forced early departure, that is already being progressively depleted by unfavorable sequence of returns dynamics, that is already generating less guaranteed monthly income as a result of early Social Security claiming. This is the point where the four warning signs stop functioning as separate, isolated problems and merge into one interconnected system failure. A particular category of retirement content circulates widely on social media carrying messages along the lines of retire at 55, ignore the criticism, and pursue the life you deserve. It is visually compelling content. It contains zero acknowledgement of the reality that at 55 you face 10 years before Medicare eligibility and will likely pay in excess of $1,000 monthly for health insurance before accessing a single Medicare benefit. The beach photographs are genuinely attractive.